Unconscious bias is almost therapy. It's a process. It takes, we're talking anywhere from your workforce being in their 20s to being kind of in their 60s. So these are individuals that have had 20 to 60 years of indoctrination into that bias or whatever they're thinking. And to think that they can take a hour, 45 minute, a day, 2-day course on unconscious bias and kind of come out of that, it's not going to happen.
So, hello and welcome to another episode of the Recruiting Revolution. Our guest today is James Dyson Jr. from Washington, D.C., United States. James has over 20 years of experience into recruitment and talent acquisition, starting off his journey as a senior recruiter at Accenture to now being, managing partner at his own venture that is Think Evolutionary, which provides services meticulously designed to infuse diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into the core of business operations. James is also a podcast host, executive coach, trainer, and speaker. Welcome, James, and thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, James. To start off, can you just tell us about your amazing journey so far in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out as kind of, as you said, I actually started out as an agency recruiter prior to Accenture, and so I kind of learned the ways and the wiles of recruiting long time ago when we were dialing for dollars, and then I kind of came up through Accenture and started learning a little bit more about corporate and got into government contracting, and that's where I spent the most of my time was kind of in that government contracting field, and that's where I got introduced into the DEI world as well, because a lot of with government contracting comes compliance and natural reporting that you have to give back to the government. So a lot of times by default, you end up being a DEI person because you're having to give all of that data to the government all the time. And it was obviously a passion of mine. My father was one of the North Carolina diner sit-ins during the civil rights movement. So I've always heard stories about that. So it had always been a passion of mine, and got into recruiting. And recruiting was kind of, I think for most recruiters, we all kind of fall into recruiting. Nobody really comes out of college looking to say like, hey, I'm gonna go be a professional headhunter or recruiter from that standpoint. So we all have our journey into it, and have came here and I started Think Evolutionary really because I wanted to help small companies. The initial idea was to help small government contractor companies really right-size their talent organization internally to prepare them as they grow, because that's a lot of challenges, especially for government contractors, is that as they win contracts, growing and finding people is not scalable for them. So helping them to be able to do that. And now we've transitioned more so into the DEI world where we're helping companies find diverse talent, doing executive placements as well. And then really also doing what I called talent technology optimization. So we're taking a look at the ATS systems and HRIS systems of clients and really saying, okay, are you getting the bang for your buck out of the system? Are you utilizing it properly? Do you kind of need to go between yourself and your technology company? So that's kind of where we are now. We're looking to add more clients and grow.
That is amazing. You mentioned that you began your career as an agency recruiter back in 2002,
Yeah.
if I'm not wrong.
Actually, it was a little bit before that. So
Okay.
I think it's we always tell people on the resume, it's like you don't want to
Yeah.
go back way too far. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so kind of when I came out of school, maybe a year after that, like 1999 is when I
Okay.
actually started. Yeah.
Got it. It's been a long time since, the evolution of recruitment. You've seen it all. Since
Right.
then, the field of recruitment has evolved a lot. Where now it goes beyond and is no longer about just filling the roles. Can you just provide insights on this shift of recruitment altogether?
Yeah, it's understanding that the employee has as much power as the employer. I think a lot of times before, earlier on, a lot of our pitches was, you have this is a great opportunity for you this company, this is an amazing company to work for. You should be happy and privileged to be able to work for this company. I think I heard somewhere either on a podcast or another show where employers are trying to get back to that, almost kind of get back to a employees should be grateful to have a job type of thing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that has transitioned. It's an employee market, and that unemployment has remained low consistently, at least across the U.S. So it's challenged to find individuals for positions now. So companies are having to now transition to sell themselves a lot more rather than having employees to sell themselves to the company. How do recruiting teams are having to kind of go out and find and steal more talent than they are to just simply recruit them off the street. So I think that's a big that's one of the larger transitions that I've seen.
Got it. Also, given like today's fast-paced business landscape, candidates and people who are passively looking for a job, they have a lot of information nowadays. So I think that has also changed a lot because, previously employer was just, that employees are looking for a job. Now employers are looking for candidates. Actually, that has evolved, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the dynamics has shifted, and so now it's the opposite. It's employers have to chase employees,
Yeah.
and especially with when 2020 happened, the large shift in COVID when that happened, that also created a large dynamic as well for employees that employers have to go get. They have to come up with a better employee proposition to find and keep these employees.
So yeah, James, we know when we talk about post-pandemic, we have seen like a real shift in recruitment and retaining the right talent. Like this is something that still remains a challenge for many organizations. So what are the pivotal strategies that you would suggest in this competitive edge in talent acquisition?
Yeah, you want to be able to understand, especially the post-pandemic, that a lot of employees are looking for hybrid work options. They or remote work options. That what employees and employers learn is that during this time, business can continue at a high volume and a good pace, with people working remote. They don't have to be in the office all the time. So you want to create a situation that you're able to balance that with the employee. So providing hybrid work options, you only have to come in 2 to 3 days a week, or be at least be able to be flexible with them from there. Also being able to have the candidate experience, you'd want to say to be a pleasant one, but not everything is going to be pleasant. But you want it to be respectful for the candidate and understand that they are also putting in time and effort. The mentality of that they should be happy to be applying to this company and getting this job. Throw that out the window, because this is you're having to sell to them as much as they are having to sell to you. And I think more employers that understand that are going to be better suited in order to be able to attract talent, especially being and then in the area of retaining it. Building a safe kind of learning environment that people can advance their careers in. Understanding the roles and where, and really being honest with people when they come into positions. Is this a lot of government contracting positions are contract roles, so they're only going to be for 3 to 5 years, and then there may be a question mark of where the role is going to go. Be honest with that. Tell them no, so that when they come into the situation and something happens, they're not looking at the company as like, well, I thought I was going to be here for forever, and the company is saying, well, we have to let you go now. Be honest with your candidate and tell them kind of what they're getting into. Understand growth roles and static roles. Provide training within the organization to allow people to internally grow to different roles within the organization. Don't it's this kind of static, kind of cold, you're in this lane and this is the only lane that you can go in. You can only go in sales, or you can't deviate and go over to operations, or however it is. It's you got to be flexible, be fluid, and understand what people career choices and what they want to do. And I think that's the biggest thing that employers can do, is learn to listen to their employees, especially now. Another thing is take a look at their benefits. It's what are you providing that other companies aren't providing? Is it going to be another way that you can, keep people? Long ago, it used to be pensions. The companies aren't giving out pensions anymore. So how can you build something that, from a benefit standpoint, is attractive to candidates and to employees? And I think those are some of a few of the things that you can do. And so it ends up being very much a situation where you want to have a platform or a place that candidates can come in and really flourish within the organization. And that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing, is figuring out your employee proposition to candidates and to employers to be able to push it out there, and figuring that out.
Yeah, that is so true. Also, when we look in today's business landscape, when we talk about from the organization's point of view, so, organizations are nowadays ideally seeking, the perfect candidate. Like what is the real meaning of the perfect or the ideal candidate in today's landscape? Like, is this the most effective hiring approach that the companies are following or should follow?
Yeah, you're never, nobody's ever going to be the perfect candidate, or nor they're going to find the perfect candidate. It's is there are there are people who are better suited for certain organizations and people who are better suited to do certain roles, and they may be a really good fit. It's the problem with companies looking for the perfect candidate is that then they're looking for 100% of everything that they want out of a job description, and you're never going to find that person doesn't exist, and they pass up so many really good people who are 80 and 90% of what they need in the role. And I think that's another thing. It's really understanding for companies to be honest with themselves and what they want in a role. A lot of companies don't even know what they want in the position, and and I think those are the companies that are, quote unquote, looking for the perfect person. They get a job description, they pull it from somewhere, a recruiter gives it to them, they find it somewhere, and they say, this is the person that I want. And looking at the tangible requirements, there may be 5 or 6 of those people in the world, and then they don't want to pay them.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that balance. If you want this magical unicorn, purple squirrel, or what we used to call them, of a person, you have to compensate them, especially in this day and age, because that's the way that you're going to have to steal them away from somebody else. I always talk to my hiring managers and give them an example. I was like, nobody in, whether it's pro sports or moving from a company to company, it's what's the enticement? I'm not going to take the same contract that I had over at this team doing the same thing. You want me to come over here and do the same thing that I did for this organization over here? What's my incentive? I have, so it's the skin in the game has to come from the employer too, that they have to understand that this, again, it's not a privilege for an employee to work for them. That's the biggest thing.
I think
Yeah.
it's more of, the potential and the ability to adapt rather than
Hmm.
the perfect skills they have. I feel that. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, yeah, and a lot of times it's also something looking internally, that there's a lack of training and a lack of um, ability to be able to take talent and convert it into what you need. Those companies that are able to take talent and mold it into how they want them and what they want, those are the companies that are succeeding and they do well. It's I can take, give me moldable clay and I can make it into the statue that I want it to be, rather than the statue has to show up here perfect.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is true. Also when we talk about during the pandemic, the complexity as well as the opportunity of workforce diversity has been observed like a lot. So, what is your perspective on how the pandemic has reshaped the workforce diversity?
Yeah, it's really, I'll say, from a perspective of, one, understanding that people can do their job remote. So now when people are hiring individuals, it opens up it opens up so many areas. So, I'm here in DC, so I have a company that's looking to hire and they're open to remote people. Well, okay, based on the time limit, we now we can go out to the Midwest. The only thing you really kind of have constraints on is just the time zones. Being able to, are they going to be flexible for whatever your customers and clients? But the amount of diversity and the different areas you can look, I'm no longer just constrained to the kind of the tri-city areas here, for DC, Maryland, and in Northern Virginia are kind of the main areas here. I can go to Pennsylvania, I can go to New York, I can go to Maine, I can go down to Florida, Georgia, whatever. So you can get so many more candidates, and that leads to that kind of diversity of candidates of a broader nature. You can, and it helps recruiters to be able to find people, especially when they can do the job from a different location, and that's a selling point as well too.
Yeah, that is so true. Also, in one of your LinkedIn posts, you've mentioned that about, addressing unconscious bias in the
Mm.
hiring process. So do you
Yeah.
think that, challenging, the norms and the existing norms especially, and the transformation begins with HR and recruiter, or is it like starts from leadership, then HRs and recruiters? Like, what is your perspective?
Well, everything from that kind of seismic shift has to come from leadership, but I think HR and recruiting can guide that change, and that's kind of where we're working together. So it's probably a two-step. It's a two-step dance. HR recruiting kind of leads the way in showing the executive team and senior leadership, here's what we need to do. Here is what we need. Kind of here's what we need to do and how to do it. And then leadership has to buy into it, because if the leaders aren't doing it, the companies aren't, the employees aren't going to do it. And then if you have employees that are understanding and changing their unconscious bias, but your leaders aren't,
Yeah.
you're still going to have the same problem, because no matter what, they are the decision makers. And if the decision makers still have this bias that they can't get themselves out of, then the company will never change. And unconscious bias is there's a lot of training on it, and I think there's a lot of companies that work on it. Unconscious bias is almost therapy. It's a process. It takes, we're talking anywhere from your workforce being in their 20s to being kind of in their 60s. So these are individuals that have had 20 to 60 years of indoctrination into that bias or whatever they're thinking. And to think that they can take a hour, 45-minute, a day, 2-day course on unconscious bias
Mm.
and kind of come out of that,
That's
it's not it it's not going to happen. And so the company itself has to make an actual investment in it. This is a 2 to week long kind of training on it. And then the training becomes every day. It's like the exercise. You can go to the gym 2 to 3 times right after the holidays and right after Christmas and say I'm making a new plan, but if you don't continue it for the rest of the year, your body's never going to get in shape. And it's the same thing for unconscious bias. You're never going to be able to come out of it unless you continue to practice it every day. And that's a challenge for most companies, is how do they realize and recognize that? And that's where I think leadership has to make that investment. And that's the biggest part.
Okay, got it. So, what are, from your perspective, what are the steps that, the leadership team or the recruiters should, start initially to avoid unconscious bias? Like, what are a few steps that we can do?
Yeah, we can work on kind of changing the process of how you're hiring people, working to eliminate some areas for your hiring managers. I'm a huge proponent of skill-based interviewing. So you separate the what we would call the behavioral, or a lot of times people will term it cultural fit, out of that interview. Find out, can the person just do the job? Can they come in and can they just do the job? You're not your initial assessment of them has no other cultural behavioral impact. Can they do the job? And then it's yes or no. Okay, then after yes or no, then you want to find a behavioral fit. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that, whether it's the star method or there was we learned a lot what we used to call the performance factoring interview, and it was just basically situational questions. And tell us about a time that you had a difficult manager and a challenging client. How did how did that make you feel? How did you resolve it? What happened in the end? And it's just walking people through maybe 2 to 3 questions of scenario based questions and getting their understanding of how they handle things. And you can determine whether or not they're going to be a good fit for your organization by doing that. And I think if you separate those two and then you can have a closing interview where they come back and that's really kind of selling it in, but splitting up the recruiting process so that you're doing a skills-based interview, having the managers create a job matrix to go to fit their job descriptions, creating tangible, inclusive job descriptions, so that when you're posting it, you're not alienating a certain representation in the workforce. Getting managers to understand and do prep and homework before the interviews of what are you going to ask them? What are you talking about? Ensuring that they're asking the same questions. Ensuring that when they go through the process, you have somebody there. If the manager hasn't been fully trained, so then you have almost kind of an impartial person in the interview there to help kind of guide the interview along. Like, these are the questions. We want to stay on task for this. Let's stay on track and go from here. So I think these are some of the things initially that HR recruiting can implement within the organization that you're not going to get the long-term kind of unconscious bias training that you need. That you want to do it in concert with that, but these are some things that you can start to do to really change the idea and to help stave off some of those biases. But people are people. They're gonna come into an interview, whether it's in face or via Zoom, and they're instantly going to see the person and they're going to have some type of thought.
Yeah.
And so it's getting them to move to either put that to the side and then get them on track with the questions and go, here's what I need from you to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Got it. You mentioned about job description. So, more on that. So how can we like formulate job description so that, we attract more of diverse pool of candidates? Like, what are your tips on that?
Yeah. So you have your job description framework. You have the cell, or what I had my old recruiting director. She used to say you got to have the sizzle. What and that's just about the company. What are the good things about the company? You putting that in the job description, and then you're putting the bona fide qualifications. These are tangible things. So does it require a college degree? Does it how many years of experience does it actually require? And be honest with yourself. Do you need somebody with a college degree? If not, don't put it in there. If you can take somebody with 10 years of experience and no degree, don't put degree down as a requirement. And then again, this is where we talk about the employer understanding the role and knowing what they really want, writing it out in an inclusive style. And that's a little bit more of a nuance now, because most people, when they write job descriptions, they try to write it to make it sound, this gregarious or amazing position. And a lot of the terms that they use are typically, but they'll say masculine terms. This is strong, awarding, career, drive, development. There's no support. How are you helping other individuals? What is support and given is being able to give to you in this role? How do you connect with others in this position? And really just having those bona fide qualifications, and you can put a little bit of what I'll call in nice to haves, the hyperbole. Must be able to get along with others, be work well in an environment.
Mm.
Okay, that's you can say it, but that's something that you can't measure somebody on looking at a resume. I don't know how well they're gonna do with a client talking to them just by looking at their resume. But I can see that they've had 20 years of sales client experience. So that's a question that I want to talk to them about. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So, considering that we have attracted a diverse pool of candidates and have transformed the, existing norms of bias. So the next question is like, how can companies create a workplace where, every individual is genuinely feel like a sense of belonging in the organization? Just attracting good candidates and diverse pool is, I think, not enough.
Right, right. You have to now you have
Yeah.
to show the candidate
Yeah.
all the things that you said that you could do inside your organization. Um, Having a DEIB organization within your company is the first step. And I think a lot of times companies think that ERG, so employee resource groups,
Yeah.
can take the place of a DEI organization. Their ERGs are a good place, but ERGs, if you're putting the burden on them to be the go-to and the kind of the DEI center for a company, you're essentially telling the underrepresented people that they have to, in along with their other job,
Yeah.
now do all the things to help them feel better in the organization. So you're essentially telling them to pull themselves on up by their bootstraps
Yeah.
and do that. So it's being the first step is being honest and having either a centralized DEI kind of organization within the group, or at least having it to be a an offshoot of HR or ops or wherever that you want to put it. Because the DEI organization isn't just HR. It is because it isn't just recruiting. It's branding. It's marketing. It's training. It's operations. It's all of those things. And I think that's why a lot of times a lot of companies have a hard time of trying to figure out where it goes, and they naturally stick it under HR all the time because it's a people function, which makes sense, and I understand that, but it needs to be its own entity. Along with talent acquisition, because I've long said that talent acquisition professionals and HR professionals are not the same. They're not cut from the same cloth. They're HR people typically are kind of firefighters. They put out, you come to them with issues. They help set up
Yeah.
strategies for benefits and going from there. Talent people are salespeople. They are
Oh.
out on the street. They're the tip of the spear. We're finding new people we're bringing in the company. Whether companies want to acknowledge it or not, they're revenue drivers, because if you don't have the people in the organization, the company is not going to make money. So they are revenue drivers, and that's the differential. And DEI kind of falls into that area where they need to be a little bit of marketing, they need to be strategic, but they also need to be drivers. And so they are the combination of the two areas.
Got it. Also,
Yeah,
I guess celebrating diversity and mentorship and training is as important, uh,
right,
making the sense of belongingness in the organization, I feel. So, yeah.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah. So, like we're coming to an end. So, as a last
Sure.
question, so what is like the future of recruitment holds in store? Like, what do you have? Like, what do you think like the recruitment has in future? Like, what evolution still is going to be seen in recruitment?
Yeah, it's going to be, and I think obviously with Chat GPT and the pop of AI, I think the ability to do a lot of these, rewriting, whether it's job descriptions, there's going to be a lot of new technology that companies need to take advantage of that allows them to do a lot of the admin functions internally, but then allows them to keep the people part of recruiting and talent acquisition going strong. AI will never replace recruiters, and any organization that they think that they can just get an AI tool that's going to replace the recruiters, they're missing the boat, because no matter what, no matter how many great computers you can have to find people, you still need to talk to people in some aspect, at least whether it's email, whether it's online. At some point, you got to connect with them, and recruiters are the one that makes that connection. But I do think technology is going to get a lot broader as far as what the recruiters are going to be able to do. And I think there's a lot of different agencies that are going to be able to help you, especially when it comes to diversity. Diversity right now is, it's under fire in a lot of different areas. You have states that have essentially banned any type of diversity training or anything that's DEI. So I think that we're going to see not necessarily a shift in what we're doing, but a shift in nomenclature. So it's, DEI, you may see DEI kind of go down and see workforce optimization and development pop up. It's it's
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
Mhm.
We're doing it. We just changed the name. So that's how you maneuver around those things. But I think technology, like everything else, is the key, and we need to embrace it to understand it to help us do a better job and to be more efficient at what we're doing. And that's definitely one of the things that we do here at Think Evolutionary is we are technology evangelists, and we love to work and partner with technology companies because part of what we're doing is helping our customers and clients optimize their technology and tools, whether it's for their talent aspect or just their internal people talent systems.
Yeah, that is true. I think Chat GPT and machine learning can only make it easy for recruiters, but at the end of the day, human
Right.
touch is as important as, the technology. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Still required. You still have to call and smile and say hi at some point. At some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah. So, James, thank you so much for your time on this episode. And it was such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you for
thank you so much for having me. Yeah, absolutely. This was fun. I'd love to come back on sometime and talk more. So
that is amazing. Thank you so much.
perfect. Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.